finished the first part, the part that we say at home. That's really the introduction to the introduction of davening. At this point, we find in the Siddur, we find the blessings and the prayers for putting on the tzitzis, for the mitzvah of tzitzis. In the bottom of page 9, first we have the blessing for the tzitzis, the small tzitzis that we wear on the garment, the talis cotton, and then the prayer for putting on the talis gadol, the big talis. Our custom is, after you get married, you wear the big talis. And we say a prayer right before we wrap ourselves with the talis, and then as we're being wrapped with the talis, we say a prayer, we say verses, we quote the different verses. So we quote verses before and after, and then we come to the mitzvah of tefillin, the blessing for the tefillin. That's what we're going to focus on today. Now, our custom is that if you're married and you're going to wear a talis gadol, you only make the blessing on the talis, on the big talis. The blessing for the talis, that's the blessing that's mentioned in the Talmud, l'satif b'tzitzis, on page 10, to wrap yourself with tzitzis. It's not mentioned in the Talmud, the blessing, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvos v'tzivanu al mitzvahs tzitzis. But that's a blessing you make on the talis cotton, on the small talis. We wear actually, even when we sleep, our custom is we wear tzitzis, pair of tzitzis. And the talis that we wear during davening, the big talis. That's the blessing that we make to wrap ourselves with tzitzis. So firstly, why are these mitzvot? Why is this part of prayer? What's the connection between tzitzis and talis and tefillin to prayer? Why is that associated with prayer? So the Talmud does mention, Rabbi Yochanan says, in Tractate Brachos, that whoever wants to accept upon themselves the yoke of heaven should wake up, wash his hands, and put on tefillin and read the Shema. And you should daven. And that's how you receive upon yourself, you can, in a whole way, you accept the yoke of heaven. And then the Talmud also says, if someone reads the Shema without wearing the tefillin, it's like you bring a sacrifice without the libations that come with the sacrifice. Because what are you reading in the Shema? You're reading in the Shema, put on the tefillin. So if you're reading the Shema and you don't wear the tefillin, so it's like you're doing the mitzvah of Shema, but you're not actually wearing the tefillin. What's written inside the tefillin? The parsha of Shema. As the Shema Vayim Shemaya, two of the parshas, two of the scrolls that are written in the tefillin. So you see a connection. It's as if you testify falsely. Here you're saying you're reading the Shema, the mitzvah to wear the tefillin, and you're not wearing tefillin. So it's like a contradiction. It's like you're bearing false testimony. So you have to put on the tefillin while you're reading the Shema. Well, what's the connection to tzitzis and talis? Especially, you're not even obligated to wear tzitzis. If you don't wear a four-cornered garment, you can go through your whole life and not wear a four-cornered garment. You're not even obligated to wear tzitzis. So what's the connection between talis and davening? And that's part of the siddur, part of the prayer. Before you pray, you have to put on the talis and the tefillin. Now we find that tefillin and tzitzis are unique from all the mitzvot in the Torah. Firstly, the Talmud tells us that tzitzis is the equivalent of all the mitzvot. Because we say in the parsha of tzitzis, which is the parsha that we read in the Shema, the third parsha is the parsha of tzitzis. So we read that the reason you should wear the tzitzis is why? Leman, in order tizkiru, you should remember all the 613 mitzvot. By wearing the tzitzis, it reminds you to do all 613 mitzvot. So much so, the numerical value of tzitzis is 600, tzaddik is 90 and yud is 10. And again, tzaddik is 90 and yud is 10. That's 200. The last saf. Then you have the 8 strings and the 5 knots. So together is 613. So the mitzvah of tzitzis is the equivalent to remind you of all 613 mitzvot. And that's the reason Hashem is telling you, I'm telling you to wear the tzitzis in order to remind you of all the mitzvot. And when we wear tzitzis here below, in this world, our actions causes Hashem to put on his talis. So it's like Hashem illuminates all the 613 mitzvot. Hashem is interactive. When we wear the talis and the tzitzis in this world, we cause Hashem to put on, so to speak, the talis his talis and tzitzis, and his light, the light of the talis, flows in and emanates into all the 613 mitzvahs. So it illuminates the 613 mitzvahs. The Talmud tells us that mitzvah of tefillin is huksha kol ha'Torah kol tefillin. All the mitzvot in the Torah compared to tefillin. Because also it says in the first parsha of the tefillin, Parshas Kaddish, that it should be mantia teiros Hashem beficha. Tefillin is going to remind you and lead you to bring to the entire Torah, to all mitzvot. So much so that we learn halacha, the halacha, that women are exempt. Any time-bound mitzvahs, women are exempt. We learn from tefillin. That just like tefillin is a time-bound mitzvah, and that's why women are exempt. So from this we learn the entire Torah, that any mitzvah that's time-bound, so much so that we actually learn halacha. It's even more than tzitzis. Tzitzis is just the equivalent of all the mitzvah. The tzitzis remind you of all the mitzvah. Here, the Torah says huksha. Huksha means that they're similar and they're connected, and therefore we actually learn a practical halacha from the tefillin. Whatever is by tefillin applies to all the mitzvah. So we see that these mitzvot are general mitzvot, and not just one of the 613 mitzvot. There's something unique about this mitzvah that's the equivalent of all the other mitzvot. They're very general. And we know the famous Bach. The famous Bach says that in general, you have the mitzvah and you have the kavan of the mitzvah, the intent of the mitzvah. What's primary? The action, the deed. If you have all the intent but you don't do the deed, you haven't done the mitzvah. You have the deed and you don't have the intent, you have the mitzvah. But there are three exceptions, he says. There are three mitzvot where the intent is an essential part of the mitzvah. The famous three leman, where the Torah says leman, because by sukkahs, you should sit in a sukkah, leman, in order, ki yedu dereseichem, that all the future generations should know that Hashem took us out of Egypt and He sheltered us. Tzitzis, it says, leman tizkiru, you should remember. And tefillin, leman tia Torah sherecha, the reason why you should do the mitzvah, leman, because the Torah of Hashem should be in your mouth. So whenever the Torah says leman, the Torah is giving us the reason, this is the reason. So in these three mitzvot, he says, the intent is, that is the mitzvah. The intent is not the kavanah, something additional. That is the whole theme of the mitzvah. The theme of the mitzvah is the intent. When you sit in a sukkah, you must have the intent and the knowledge and the awareness that I'm sitting in the sukkah because just like Hashem, when we left Egypt, Hashem sheltered us and we sat in Hashem's sukkah, so too I'm sitting in Hashem's shade, in Hashem's sukkah. The intent is an essential part of the mitzvah. And the same is with tzitzis. That's the intent, that I'm wearing the tzitzis in order to remind myself. It's like my uniform. And it's reminding me of all 630 mitzvah. That is an essential part of the mitzvah. And the same is with tefillin. The intent of the mitzvah is an essential part of the mitzvah. The intent of the mitzvah is to commit your mind and commit your heart to Hashem, to remind you that Hashem took us out of Egypt. And just like Hashem took us out of Egypt, and Hashem showed that He runs this world and He controls this world, and He's in charge of this world, and all the miracles and wonders. So therefore, I commit my mind, my neshama that's in my mind, then I commit my heart to control my urges and my desires, and I commit myself to serve Hashem. So that intent is an essential part of the mitzvah. It's not just do the mitzvah, and it's nice if you have an intent. It's like icing on the cake. It's not icing on the cake. This is the mitzvah. As Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, in chapter 41, TanyaClass.com, right in the beginning, that the intent is I'm accepting upon myself the yoke of heaven. That intent is essential. That is the point. That is the purpose of the mitzvah. That is what the mitzvah is all about. That is the content of the mitzvah. So you can't just do the mitzvah and do it mindlessly, mechanically. But the whole point is to be focused and to concentrate and to commit and to be aware. That is the mitzvah. And of all three mitzvot, Sukkot is something that happens once a year. Tzitzis is all the time. We even sleep in our talis cup. Nevertheless, tzitzis, talis, you're only obligated if you wear a four-cornered garment. If you don't wear a four-cornered garment, you don't have to wear it. There's no obligation on the person that you must find a four-cornered garment to wear tzitzis. Tefillin you must wear. It's an obligation. So in the mitzvah of tefillin, we find the ultimate expression. The whole foundation of Tanya is on the verse Kikara velecha davar ma'od, that Yiddishkeit is close and near to you to do, to act, to do, to speak, and to think. Thought, speech, and action. Where do these three things merge as one the most? In tefillin. Because tefillin is the action. You have to wear the tefillin. You have to write the Shema on the parchment, and you have to wear the boxes on the head and on the arm. And you make the blessing, like all other mitzvot. But here the intent is essential. So here you have the coming together of all three, the thought, the speech, and the action. So of all the 613 mitzvot, this mitzvah really captures the essence of what all the mitzvot are, the point and the purpose of all the mitzvot, which is to bring together thought, speech, and action. And that's why the bar mitzvah boy, what does he talk about? What's his first talk as a mature adult? He talks about the tefillin. The pilpul is about the tefillin. The maimer is about the tefillin. That's what distinguishes. That's what makes you a man. You become obligated to wear the tefillin because it's essential. From all the mitzvot, there's something unique about tefillin. And since intent is an essential part of this mitzvah, therefore that fits in with the davening. The whole davening is about intent. The whole essence of davening is intent, awareness, consciousness, focus, concentration, connection, conscious connection with godliness. And that's what we accomplish through the talus and the tefillin. As Chassidus says, it's like a shield, because davening is a time of battle. It's a war. And you arouse the enemy. When you fight the enemy, you wake the enemy up. The enemy is fighting for its life. That's why your best business ideas come in the middle of davening. All the distractions, the juiciest part of davening, suddenly all your best plans, your future trips, everything comes up in the middle of davening. Because it's a time of battle. You're stirring up the pot. You're fighting. You're awakening your conscious, your godly soul, and therefore the animal soul is fighting back with everything that he has. So you need a protection. So the talus and the tefillin, they're your protection. They block the enemy. They block your mind from all these extraneous thoughts and all these distractions. And it helps you to keep focused and to keep and to concentrate. The talus surrounds you and protects you, and the tefillin is on your mind, on your brain, sitting on your brain and your mind, and sitting on your arms, opposite your heart, and you're tying your left arm, as the Zohar says, like tying, it's like a chaining. You're putting in chains. You're putting the enemy in chains. The left hand, the left side, the Yetzer Hara, you're chaining it up. So you're committing your mind, you're committing your heart, and the straps that the mind and the heart and your arms and the straps reach all the way to your legs, that every part of you should be on the same page. You need restraints. You need some handcuffs, some restraints. You have the restraints. You have to control yourself. So this is the preparation for davening. This is a part of davening. The talus and the tefillin and the blessings over the talus and the tefillin. And the verses that we say before we put on the talus and after, these are essential things. And he starts in stages. First we have the blessing and the mitzvah of tzitzis. Tzitzis is a talus cotton, it's a small talus that we wear under our shirts and that we wear even when we go to sleep. We have a special night tzitzis, even when we go to sleep. Tzitzis represents that even when a person is asleep, even when your mind and heart are asleep, you don't feel consciously, you don't feel any connection, you don't perceive godliness, but nevertheless, you're committed. You're a soldier. You're wearing the talus, you're wearing your uniform. A soldier is a soldier even when he sleeps. He's ready for duty at a moment's notice. He knows he's not free. He's a soldier. He's committed. He's dedicated. So that's the basic level. The first level of devotion, of feeling committed. Then you have the big talus. The big talis you wear during the day, before davening, you wrap yourself up around it, with it. An emotional commitment, more than just a dedication, a devotion, a practical commitment. You're more advanced. It's a little more all-encompassing. It's your heart. But then you advance. Then comes the tefillin. The talis is more general. It's like a general inspiration. It surrounds you. It's like a garment. It's not internal. It's like emotional. You feel, you're inspired. It's all-encompassing. Then you get into specifics. The mind, the heart. You're dedicating your mind, you're dedicating your heart. It's already specific organs in the person. It's the mind, it's the heart. The tefillin itself is compartmentalized. 4 compartments, 4 different parchments. You're getting into the details. It's becoming much more specific, much more internalized. The tefillin engages your mind. It's on your head, sits on your head. And then the back, all 3 minds, every part, the creative mind, the analytical mind, and the knot sits on the back, on the Olympic mind, on the das. And from there, the straps flow downward to your heart, emotions that are based on understanding, on knowledge. So this is already a higher level, a much more advanced level. And then the 4th step is, you cover your tefillin with the talis. So that represents the ultimate level, where you reach a level of awe of Hashem, where Hashem's presence becomes so palpable and so real that you're in awe of Hashem, it's beyond your understanding. But you only reach that level only at the end, after you've gone through the different stages, the talis katan, and then the talis gadol, and then the tefillin. Then you reach a level where the talis goes over the tefillin. And you reach a whole different level of connection with Hashem. And this is all part of the preparation for the davening. This is part and parcel of the davening. Because, as the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, chapter 41, in order for a Jew to serve Hashem, it's essential for him to first accept upon himself the yoke of heaven. It's not enough to be motivated to do the mitzvot with a love of Hashem. You would think that my fear of Hashem is enough to stop me from doing sins, from sinning. If you fear Hashem, you're not going to violate His wish. You love Hashem, you're going to be motivated to do what He wishes, His mitzvot, His positive mitzvot. So Alter Rebbe explains, no. That the root, the foundation and the root of all the mitzvot, even the positive mitzvah, has to be, the foundation must be, and the root that gives it life and sustains it is the acceptance of the yoke of heaven. And meaning, realizing Hashem wanted to be king. And therefore, it's up to me. If Hashem commands me and I listen, then I coronate Him as king. If God forbid I don't listen, then I single-handedly demoted Hashem from being king. Because every one of us, individually, is like Adam. Why was man created alone and single? Because every one of us is like Adam. What was Adam's big sin? The original sin. What was so terrible? He didn't murder, he didn't rape. Hey, he ate from the fruit. And that degraded the whole universe. The worst sin. Why? What was so terrible? What happened? Because the answer is Hashem wanted to be king. And what's the definition of a king? Definition of a king is there's a king and there's a subject. You can't be a king without a subject. The subject is not the king. And the king wishes, and the subjects obey the king's wishes. The king wants you to do something and you do it because he's the king and you're the subject. And you consider it an honor. It's your duty, it's an honor and a joy to be that subject. You can't be a king over animals. You can't be a king over stones, over trees. A king, you can only be a king over a peer. You're not a dictator, you're a king. And he willingly subjects himself to you, and that's what makes you a king. So all of the worlds, even the upper worlds, to Hashem are completely insignificant. Hashem can't be king over the angels. Hashem can't be king over anything, because anything in comparison to Hashem is insignificant. There's nothing for Hashem to be king over. And yet Hashem desired and chose us to be His subject, chose us to be significant enough that we can turn Him into king. That by our freedom of choice and by our choosing Him as king, we crown Him as king of the universe. So it's such an honor and such a privilege. And therefore Hashem is standing with bated breath, so to speak, right over us and is watching us. Because Hashem's destiny is in our hands. Am I king or am I not king? If you do the mitzvah, I'm king. If you don't do the mitzvah, I'm not king. And that's the greatest honor that we can have, to be chosen to be that subject. We have the power to coronate Hashem as king. So Hashem's destiny is in our hands. So when you do a mitzvah, any mitzvah, primarily, the purpose of that mitzvah is that I am subjecting myself. Hashem is my personal king. And Hashem's wish is my command. That's my life. My life is to serve Hashem. As we say in every blessing before every mitzvah, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech. He's king. He's my king. And when you do a mitzvah, you're drawing down Hashem's infinite light into your soul, and therefore your soul becomes, at that moment, your soul becomes nullified to Hashem. And that's the purpose of the mitzvah. The purpose of the mitzvah is the mitzvah, by doing the mitzvah, and by studying Torah, and drawing down, revealing Hashem's infinite light into our soul, into my life, into my soul responds and becomes completely nullified before the infinite, for Hashem. And that's the purpose of the mitzvah. That has to be the intent. So before you study Torah, before you do a mitzvah, before you put on the talis, before you put on the tzitzis, before you put on the tefillin, you have to think about it. You have to think about what's happening. What am I doing? The 10 Commandments were given in the singular. Hashem is speaking individually to each and every Yid. I am your God. I am your king and you are my subject. You make me king single-handedly and king of the whole universe. When you do the mitzvah, you're coronating Hashem as king of the universe. You're affirming that Hashem is king of the universe. You, single-handedly. Every Jew, single-handedly. Through my one act, by me accepting Hashem's wish and subjecting myself to Hashem's wish and will, I single-handedly coronated Hashem as king of the universe. If Adam, through one sin, could degrade and downgrade the whole universe, imagine the power of one Jew doing one mitzvah. It changes the whole universe. And we see that clearly by tefillin. If a Jew puts on tefillin once in his life, it changes his whole status forever. It'll never be the same. He's no longer a kakafta lemanach tefillin. And it has infinite implications. So you see it clearly by tefillin. And the point and the purpose is that when I do the mitzvah, I'm drawing down Hashem's infinite light into my soul, and my soul becomes unified before Hashem. So you have to sit and reflect and think about what is happening when you do a mitzvah. But that's a general meditation. Then Alter Rebbe goes on, beginning of chapter 41, and says specifically every mitzvah has its own unique meditation and reflection. And he spells it out. With the talis, it says in the Zohar, you're accepting upon yourself Hashem's kingdom. You're wrapping yourself up in the talis, you're wrapping yourself up in Hashem's kingdom. The talis represents this idea of accepting upon yourself the kingdom of Hashem. Hashem Malach Geis Lavish. Hashem, it's a garment. Kingdom, royalty is a garment to Hashem. So when you wrap yourself up in the garment, you're drawing down to your soul the royalty of Hashem. So the talis is specifically the idea of accepting upon yourself the kingdom of Hashem. And that's what you have in mind when you put on the talis. That I'm wrapped up in Hashem's royalty, in Hashem's kingdom. And that's a general acceptance. I accept upon myself the royalty of Hashem. Hashem is my king, my personal king, and I'm the subject. And then, in the Tefillin, the Zohar says, and the Kabbalah explains that the 4 parshias represents the 4 different levels of the mind. Parsha is Kaddish, the first parsha, the scroll that's in the Tefillin, talks about the B'chor, the first. So that represents Chachma, the first level of consciousness, creative mind, so the level of the divine supernal wisdom. The second parsha is Bina, the analytical mind. It says when your child will ask you questions, that's the mind that asks and queries and searches and tries to understand. That's the moyach of Bina. Then you have the limbic brain, Das, the brain that the maturity or the decision-making brain. That's the connector between the idea and the heart. That's the part that's connected to the spine, the torso, and the heart. When you focus, the ability to focus and to concentrate. And that's what connects the idea from being an abstract idea to personalizing the idea. That this is something I should love, it's good for me and I should love it and be attracted to it. This is something that should repel me and I should hate and distance myself and run away from. So the two emotions that come from the Das, the right hand, the left hand, kindness, I drew it close to me or I keep it away from me. And that's the parsha of Shema, talks about love, v'ahavta Hashem Elokecha. And the parsha of Hayam Shemaya talks about punishment. If you don't listen to Hashem, then we're going to be expelled from the land, etc. The idea of yirah, the idea of fear. So when a Jew puts on tefillin, you're drawing Hashem down into the four different minds of the supernal sfirot in heaven. And what does that mean more specifically? What do you mean you draw down the infinite on your mind, four different parts of your mind? So the Rebbe spells it out. What it means is that I should utilize my mind exclusively for Hashem. Dedicate your mind for Hashem. It's not enough just for a general acceptance upon yourself, accepting upon yourself the yoke of heaven. Each mitzvah represents something specific. I have to accept upon myself the yoke of heaven that I'm dedicating my mind. I'm dedicating my creative mind. I'm dedicating my analytical mind. I'm dedicating my das, my chachma, bina, and das, which is divided into two parts. Every part of me I'm dedicating exclusively to Hashem. That's what it means. I'm accepting upon myself the yoke of heaven, that I'm dedicating every part of me specifically, that my best abilities and mind I'm going to dedicate to Hashem. And then you have to dedicate your heart. Shibud halev ve'hamoyach. You have to dedicate your mind and your heart to Hashem. So it becomes very specific. Talus is more general, is broad. I'm wrapping myself up in the talus, Hashem's talus. I'm wrapping myself up. I'm surrounded by this acceptance by the royalty, the divine royalty. And when I wrap myself up in my talus, Hashem is wrapping himself up in his talus, so to speak, and is revealing his royalty. And I draw down the royalty, the attribute of royalty of Hashem into my life, into my soul, into my life. And then more specifically, then with the tefillin, you take it a step further. You get more specific, more internalized. That means specifically, I'm going to dedicate my mind to study Torah, to understanding Hashem. And this fits in with what prayer is. Prayer is all about connecting with Hashem. It's what gives life to all the mitzvot. Instead of your Judaism just being dry and by rote and mechanical and mindless and soulless and joyless and passionless, prayer is what infuses your day and your life as a Jew, all day, all your activities, with a sense of love of Hashem, a sense of awe of Hashem, a sense of connection with Hashem. But it all begins with accepting upon yourself the yoke of heaven. That's the root, that's the foundation and the root that nourishes and nurtures the whole edifice of Torah and mitzvah. So therefore you have to start with the talus and the tefillin. This is the accepting upon yourself the yoke of heaven, and this becomes the foundation and the root for all of the mitzvah. And it comes alive when you read the Shema and you're praying. That's when you experience. You actually experience it. You're standing in front of Hashem and talking to Hashem, intimate with Hashem. You have a private audience with Hashem. It's not coincidence, it's not by accident that just these two mitzvot are an essential part of prayer. You can't envision prayer without the talus and the tefillin. That is because it's all connected. It all goes hand in hand. And that's why we start with the talus and the tefillin.